Welcome to Bethel Assembly, where you matter. And today's message, made righteous. Romans chapter 3, verse 19 to 24. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God. Therefore, no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by works of the law. Rather, through the law, we become conscious of our sin. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. This righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There is no difference between Jew and Gentile, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and all are freely justified by His grace through the redemption that came by Christ. God's people, the Israelites, had spent 400 years in Egypt, and during this time they learned the ways of the Egyptians. They learned how to make idols of silver and gold and to worship them as gods. They learned how to conduct themselves in speech and conduct and all matters of daily life like Egyptians. God found it necessary to give them the law so that it can show them what it means to live a righteous life before God. The law was never meant as a means to justify anyone. The law was not meant as a way to bring about salvation. Because if the law could justify, there would have been no need for sin offerings or a day of atonement. But these were put in place because God knew that man would fall short of the requirements of the law. God has revealed His plan of salvation in the Garden of Eden and through the promise that He made to Abraham, by your seed will all the nations of the earth be blessed. As we just read in Romans chapter 3, the law was meant as a mirror to show us our shortcomings and to make us aware of the sin in our lives. The Israelites had elevated the law to a level of being a means of salvation. So, as long as you were seen to be outwardly keeping the law, you were regarded as someone who was in right standing with God and having attained salvation. It did not matter if your heart was desperately wicked, as long as you outwardly kept all the requirements of the law. Jesus exposed this on the Sermon on the Mount, showing what the true intent of the law was by moving the goalpost from an external one to an internal one. He said, "You have heard it said, but I say to you." So even if you look at a woman and lust after her in your heart, you have already committed adultery. If you are angry with your brother or your sister, you are subject to judgment just as though you have committed murder. Moving the requirement for righteousness from an outward, works-based endeavor to an inward, keeping the intent of your heart and your thoughts pure. Making it even more difficult for us to meet the requirements for righteousness in our own strength. The only way we can be justified, the only way we can be saved then, is by the grace of God and through faith in the completed work of Jesus Christ on the cross. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 8 and 9. For it is by grace that you have been saved, through faith. And this is not from yourselves, it is a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. Though we can be made righteous by the mercy and grace of God and not in our own strength, it does not mean that because we are saved by grace that we can continue to sin, but rather what we were unable to do in our own strength, God achieves by changing us from the inside out, making us a new creature, and by changing our hearts and placing in us a desire to please Him, making us slaves to righteousness. Oh, how great is the mysteries of God, who takes a sinful man like me and justifies me by His Son, so that I can be saved from the curse of sin and death and be counted as righteous in His sight.